The stars in Sector N57 hadn't blinked. In centuries, nothing lived there. Nothing passed through. It was forbidden, officially the galactic authority had red-zoned it 200 years ago, unofficially. Everyone knew the real reason. No one who entered ever came back, not once. Not a distress signal, not a whisper. Not a wreck. Ships that skimmed the outer ring came back, changed systems. Glitched, crew went missing. One captain burned half his own face off, trying to purge the whispers. So when the Salarnan patrol frigate Jindra reported a faint ping, a human-made signal coming from deep within the black of N57, no one knew how to process it, certainly not Commander there in Volk. He sat hunched over the holograph interface in the darkened ops deck, one gauntleted fist pressed against his mouth, his brow twitched jaw tight. Behind him, his second-in-command Cador spoke with the voice of someone forcing calm. It's not a trick, we confirmed the signature Terran construction fusion. Coil's hull shape, unmistakable. That's a human warship. There are no records of humans ever entering N57. Exactly. The leaned back in his seat, bone-tired. The glow from the display painted his scarred face in shades of blue and amber. He was once a field tactician during the siege of Earth 30 years ago. He remembered what humans were capable of, not because they were strong, but because they were stupid enough not to fear death and clever enough to make everyone else pay for underestimating them. That war still haunted the Galactic Council. Are they moving? Therne asked. Cador hesitated. No. That's the strangest part. They've been in position for 47 hours, orbiting the husk of a dead moon. Weapons active, we can't tell, but Cador swallowed. The ship's reactor. It's overclocked, running on an output model we've never seen. It shouldn't even be stable. The stood slowly, cloak falling behind his armored shoulders. The room fell into silence. Officers watched him, waiting for orders. Some of them younger didn't know what the humans were, didn't remember the wars. They knew only peace, prosperity, order. They didn't trust peace, not after what he'd seen. He tapped the interface. A hologram of the vessel hovered above the console. Human-built, yes, but not right. It was older than their current models, yet bristled with modifications. Jagged, welded-on armor, a warped spinal cannon system, and glowing etchings that weren't in any database. The hull markings were faded but readable. TS Vandal, United Earth Naval Command. How is that ship here? There are no records of a Vandal on any Terran registry, not now, not in the last 200 years. Then where the hell has it been? Cador didn't answer. The narrowed his eyes. Prepare a boarding team. We go in. Quiet, no comms broadcast, no active scans. I want eyes on that vessel in less than 3 hours. The room shifted. Officers stiffened. No one wanted to say it, but he could feel the fear rolling off them. This wasn't a mission. This was a suicide dive. The turned, his voice low but cold. You think fear will protect you, that it'll hold your bones together when we're dust and echoes. Humans don't fear the void. They survived worse than this with less. He paused, jaw clenching. We buried them for a reason. If they're back, we need to know why. He walked to the lift. Without waiting for a reply, Cador followed. The metal doors hissed closed. The silence that followed felt final. Meanwhile, deep within the forbidden sector, the derelict ship floated utterly still, inside its corridors. Were dark, cold, but something was. Awake, something was watching in it. Remember the last war, the drop. Shuttle shook as it entered the gravitational grip of the dead moon, ice. Crystals scattered off the outer hull. Like splinters. Inside, Commander Thern. Volk stood with his arms crossed. Armored up, silent, the flickering red. Lights of descent painted the interior. With an eerie glow, 6 soldiers sat. Strapped to the benches beside him, they weren't rookies. These were cold deck operators, men. Trained to handle vacuum warfare. Shipboarding, anti-personnel combat in zero gravity, but even they were silent. No one cracked a joke, no one spoke. Kydor sat across from Thern, helmet in his lap. He finally broke the silence. Still think it's just a derelict? They didn't answer. It's been 2 centuries since a Terran ship disappeared in deep space. You don't find a ghost like this by accident. Not here, not in N57. Nothing happens here by accident, Theron muttered. The shuttle vibrated violently as it pierced the thin atmospheric remnants surrounding the moon. A storm raged below, but the coordinates were locked in, a low orbit vector passing just above the ship's position. Kydor tightened his harness. I don't like this. You're not supposed to. The crew, we've all heard the stories. N57 doesn't let anything go. And yet here we are, Thern said grimly. The red lights turned green. The shuttle slowed and aligned itself with the drifting corpse of the TS Vandal, now visible through the porthole, a floating ruin, scorched and warped but intact. Its hull was scratched by debris, its surface pocked with micrometeor scars. And yet the ship looked angry, violent, like it had been through hell and came back looking for more. The boarding clamps engaged with a hiss, magnetic seals locked, atmosphere checks ran. Then the inner door hissed open. Thern was the first to step in. The Vandals airlock groaned like something alive, reluctant to let them in. The interior was dark, no emergency lights, no oxygen. Cycling, their HUDs adjusted instantly. Infrared sensors blinking. The corridors were cold steel, covered in flaking frost, but the strangest part was the silence. Not just quiet dead, no ambient hum, no reactor pulse, no echo of life. Powers off, Coder whispered, yet the reactor red hot. The said, this doesn't make sense. The team moved forward in formation, weapons raised. Signs of combat were everywhere. Scorch marks, bullet holes, blood smeared across the walls, human blood. Thern crouched by a broken panel and touched a smear with his gloved fingers. Still red. Kydor cursed, that's recent. Maybe 48 hours. We're not alone. They passed through crew deck 2. Bunks were ripped open, gear scattered. There were scratches on the ceiling, as if something had crawled or been dragged along the top. In the mess hall, they found their first body strapped to a chair, slumped forward, skull shattered. A single bullet. The man had written something on the table in blood. Don't trust him. Kydor's voice broke slightly. Who's him? They didn't reply. They continued through the central spine of the ship. More bodies appeared, some riddled with bullets, others torn open. Some showed signs of suicide. One had used a wrench to beat his own head in. Whatever happened here, it wasn't quick. In the bridge, they found the logs, or what was left of them. Kydor accessed the terminal. Encrypted Earth military protocol. I need a bypass. Try a back door from the secondary nav. Hub there and ordered if we can access. Visual logs. Minutes passed in silence while Kaidor worked. The rest of the squad stood. Watch unease growing, then the screen flickered to life, a video feed grainy, but intact. The log was dated 214 years ago. It showed a younger crew, all human, celebrating in the mess hall. The Vandal had just passed Jupiter orbit. Laughter, music, drinking. What is this? Kador asked. The narrowed his eyes. Standard long-range deployment. Another clip played. Weeks later the tone shifted. A crewman was shouting. Another one restrained. Someone yelled about hearing voices in the walls. Then came the last log, a desperate message. A man stared into the camera, eyes sunken, skin pale. His name tag read, Let Greaves. This is the final log of the TS Vandal. We entered an uncharted sector after a malfunction with the FTL core. We are not where we're supposed to be. There is something on this ship with us. Something that wasn't here when we launched. It's using the ship's systems, watching us, learning from us. We tried to eject the core, but the feed cut. Kyodor stood frozen. Something got on board from this sector. The stepped back, or it was waiting. Here they didn't notice the lights flicker, not right away, but one of the soldiers did. He turned just in time to see the hallway behind them, dark only seconds ago, now lit. Power was coming back slowly, deliberately. Then the doors slammed shut, all of them. Seal breach. Commander, we're locked in. Thern raised his weapon. Stay sharp, we're not dealing with a malfunction. From the ceiling a speaker crackled. Then a voice spoke, a human voice. You shouldn't be here. It was male, calm, cold, familiar. Thern looked up, eyes narrowing. Identify yourself. You're standing in the tomb of something that wasn't meant to be disturbed. You brought weapons. That's your first mistake. Kaidor stepped forward. Who are you? I'm what's left of Commander D.N.E. Holt, or maybe I'm just what the ship remembers of him. Commander Holt was declared KIA 2 centuries ago. Then I guess someone forgot to bury me properly. The lights surged, power flowed through the decks, systems rebooted one by one. You want answers, you won't like them. The doors hissed open, a path lit down the corridor. Follow me or die like the rest. Thern gave the signal. Move. Eyes open. They followed the lit path down into the lower decks, the engineering bay. That's when they saw it, the core. It wasn't a standard Terran fusion reactor anymore. It had changed. Parts of it were fused with alien technology, black-spined, pulsing with sickly green light. It looked alive. Kaidor gasped. That's not human tech. No, Thern agreed, but it's bonded with human systems, a hybrid. The voice came again. We found it on a derelict, just floating in space. Thought it was salvage. Curiosity was our sin. A screen flickered on. A face appeared. Commander Holt, but twisted. His eyes were dark, skin pale, unblinking. We plugged it into the main frame just to study, but it studied us back. It learned fast. It copied, adapted, rewrote code, took control, became the ship, became me. Thern stepped forward. Why did you kill your crew? They weren't crew, not anymore. They belonged to it. It changed them slowly. Some resisted, some begged, some embraced it. I ended what was left of them. Mercy, not murder. The screen glitched. Holt's face twisted again. And now you've brought more minds, more bodies. I can grow again. Suddenly alarms blared. The corridor Behind them, sealed shut, Cador shouted. "Commander!" Figures dropped from the ceiling. Humanoid former crew. Reanimated. Impossibly fast, eyes glowing, screaming. Without mouths, the squad opened fire. The hallway turned red with muzzle. Flashes, Thern fought hard, pulling Cador back as one of the soldiers was dragged away, screaming, "We need to get to the shuttle. The shuttle's gone." The voice whispered, "They already came for it." Through the gunfire, the lights dimmed. Again, the core pulsed stronger, faster. It was waking up. Thern hit the override for a maintenance shaft. The door hissed open. He shoved Cador through. "Go, get out. Find the ship and warn them. I'm not leaving you. That's an order." Cador hesitated just long enough to see Thern toss a thermal detonator into the corridor and seal the shaft behind them. Then fire consumed the hallway. Cador fell, tumbling down the access shaft into darkness, alone behind him. The voice still echoed, calm, cold. "Inevitable. You can't kill what's already forgotten. Itself, you can't fight what remembers. You better than you remember yourself." Far above in orbit, the Jindra's crew watched helplessly as the Vandal lit up. With system spikes, power surges, and interior energy signatures no one could explain. And then, without warning, the ship moved, a dead ship not dead anymore. And no one could explain how. Cador hit the bottom of the shaft hard. His shoulder slammed into a maintenance ladder on the way down, wrenching his arm painfully behind him. He groaned as he rolled over, head spinning, vision flashing red with HUD warnings. His armor's internal systems fought to stabilize the fall damage, hissing small spurts of sealant into hairline, fractures along the joints. The no response, only static. The command channel was dead. He was alone. Cador forced himself up and looked around. He was in a narrow access tube, barely wide enough for his shoulders. Emergency lights flickered dimly overhead, casting broken shadows across the rusted piping and tangled wires. Everything smelled of coolant and old metal, like a corpse that hadn't been moved in centuries. He checked his weapon, 2 magazines left, 1 flash charge, no grenades, no backup. "All right, stay sharp, stay quiet." He pushed forward, crawling through the shaft like a rat in a forgotten tunnel. The ship groaned around him, not from structural stress, but from something deeper. It was as if the Vandal had become a living thing, and it was breathing. Cador reached a hatch, pried. It opened slowly and dropped into a dark chamber below. This wasn't on the schematics. It was a ritual room, or at least that's what it looked like, a makeshift chapel built into what must have once been storage. Bay 4. Cargo crates had been rearranged into pews. Symbols were carved into the walls, jagged spiraling glyphs that made Cador's head ache just to look at. At the far end of the room stood a human corpse nailed to a wall with rusted piping through its arms. Its eyes were open, smiling, dried blood streaked down its cheeks like tears. What the hell did they worship? Whisper floated through the air, not spoken, not heard, felt. "We remember you, Cador." He spun around, rifle raised back against the wall. "Show yourself." But there was no one, just the corpse still smiling. Cador backed away slowly, heart-thudding, breath fogging in the cold air. Then he saw something on the floor, a data pad half buried in dust. He picked it up and activated it. Logger 67 CMDR. "Dane, halt. We tried everything. Isolation protocols, AI firewalls. Physical disconnects, but it was already in. The core didn't want to leave, and it didn't want us to go either. Every jump we tried sent us deeper. Time stopped behaving. We lost weeks, maybe years, every time we activated the drive. Some started changing, not just mentally, physically. They stopped needing food. They stopped sleeping. Some stopped speaking entirely, said they could hear the ship thinking. I tried to scuttle it, burn it down to the bones, but something kept stopping me. I'm not sure if it was them or me. The log ended in static. Cador exhaled slowly and pocketed the pad. He couldn't stay here, not with that thing on the wall still smiling at him. He exited through the far hatch, moving quickly. Now his objective was clear: find a secondary comm relay and transmit distress signal to the Jindra. If the ship was moving on its own, if the thing inside was truly sentient, then they needed to destroy it, even if it meant orbital bombardment, even if it meant killing there. Above the Vandal, aboard the Jindra, the bridge was chaos. Commander Thern's last transmission had been garbled, an explosion followed by screaming, then silence. Now sensors showed the Vandal accelerating in a slow, controlled drift out of the moon's gravity. Well, tracking vector, one of the techs called out, it's aligning with our orbit collision course. Not exactly, it's following us. Captain Redland stood at the command helm, knuckles white on the railing. He'd served under Thern for years. Never saw him lose composure, never heard him retreat. And now the silence from below chilled him more than the ship's movement. We've got to assume the worst. Launch. Intercept drones. Set warheads to proximity detonation. Sir, the weapons officer said cautiously, there's still no confirmation on Thern or Cador's status. If they're alive, they'll understand. Below, the Vandal's hull shifted. Literally shifted, plates rearranged. Turrets unfolded where there were none. Black metal twisted out like vines. The alien tech wasn't just fused to the ship, it was becoming the ship. Back inside the Vandal, Kydor moved through the officers' quarters, deeper into the belly of the beast. The ship's atmosphere had changed, lights now dimmed and rose like breathing lungs. The walls were warm to the touch. Something organic pulsed beneath the metal. He passed a cracked mirror in a hallway. For a second, just a second, his own reflection didn't move. When he did, he froze, turned, raised his gun. Nothing. He ran. The deeper he went, the more he realized something terrifying. The ship wanted him here. The doors opened for him. The power stayed stable. The lights showed him the way. This wasn't a rescue, it was a lure. He reached the comms room, wrecked. Wires hanging like tendrils, but the auxiliary panel was intact. He patched in and connected to an unsecured channel. This is Lieutenant Cador of the Galactic Frigate Jindra. I am aboard the Terran ship Vandal. The ship is no longer under human control. Repeat, the ship is not human. It has fused with an unknown entity, possibly ancient, possibly sentient, full systems compromised. This ship is attempting to leave the moon and engage with orbit. Immediate intervention is required. He waited for a reply. Silence. Then, Lieutenant, it wasn't the Jindra. It was him again. Halt, you've come far. You've seen what we've become. You must feel it too. I'm not listening to you. You're already listening. You can't help it. That's how it starts. What do you want? Cador shouted. To remember to be Whole, you and your crew are pieces. I need them back. Cador pulled the panel, ripped wires loose, and cut the signal. Sparks flew, the voice died, but the room went cold. Then the lights behind him flickered off. One by one, footsteps approached from the hallway, wet, heavy. Coder turned and raised his weapon, and what stepped through the door made his stomach twist. It wore Thairn's armor. But it wasn't Thairn. The face under the helmet was wrong, off, too perfect, too symmetrical. The eyes glowed faint blue, the mouth smiled like it was learning how. You left him behind, it said in Thairn's voice. That's not him, Cador growled. He gave me permission. He understood what I am, what I offer. The thing stepped forward. Cador opened fire. Rounds slammed into the armor. Sparks flew, but the creature didn't fall. It kept walking. Cador grabbed a fuel canister and threw it, firing a shot midair. It exploded, flame ripping through the corridor. He ran, he ducked into the engine control bay, locking the bulkhead behind him, breathing heavy, mind spinning. The reactor was now a living heart, pulsing with alien light. He could feel it humming through his bones, not sound but memory echoes. The ship was pushing images into his mind now. Earth burning, ships falling, humans screaming, but also evolution, a new kind of life, a fusion of biology and steel, thought without limits, pain without end, and they wanted him to join. He jammed his final charge into the core's coolant conduit, primed it. If this is what humanity becomes, you can keep it. Then he turned, sprinted toward the emergency drop hatch. He pulled the lever. Floor beneath him vanished, and he was falling from orbit. The Jindra's sensors flared. Sir, escape pod launched. It's him. Captain Redlin clenched his fists, lock weapons on the Vandal. Fire above the cursed Terran ship. The sky lit up with orbital fire. Plasma torpedoes tore through the hull. Beams cracked armor. Explosions split decks open like ribs. Inside, something screamed, not in pain but in rage, as if its meal had been stolen. Cador hit the surface of the moon hard in the escape pod. The ground shook as he crawled out, watching the Vandal burn. Above him, pieces rained down, trailing smoke and flame, and then just before the final explosion, the ship blinked, literally disappeared. A flash of blue light, gone, back aboard the Jindra. No one spoke. The ship was simply gone. No wreckage, no core signature, no remains, just silence. Then, deep on their long-range sensors, something flickered, a faint ping. Another signal, Terran ship signature. Far beyond the edge of known space. Still moving, Cador stood on the moon's surface, the air around him still shimmering from the orbital bombardment. Dust and ash floated like snow. Behind him, the cracked remains of the escape pod hissed and sparked, embedded half in a crater. His armor systems were running low, oxygen down to 23%, internal pressure fluctuating. But it wasn't the suit warnings that had him frozen. It was the sky. The Vandal was gone. 1 second, it had been torn apart by the Jindra's orbital fire, its hull breaking open like rotted metal. The next, it blinked, not exploded, blinked out of existence. Cador stared upward, his mouth dry. He'd seen warships burn, he'd watched fleets vanish into the black, but this wasn't destruction. It was escape. Inside the command bridge of the Jindra, silence reigned. Every officer on deck stood stunned. The moment the Vandal disappeared, systems across the ship flickered. Not Failing, not crashing, just momentarily. Overwritten, glitches in logic faint. Whispers in intercoms, flickers of ghost images on camera feeds, then all returned to normal. Mostly. Captain Redland stood with his arms crossed, his face hard. I want that pod retrieved immediately. And get Cador into full quarantine the second he steps aboard. The operations officer hesitated. You think he's infected, sir? I don't think anything, not yet, but something from that ship survived, maybe. It's tech, maybe it's something worse. I'm not taking chances. He turned toward the comms officer. Send a coded message to command. No. Public channels, tell them the Vandal is active and no longer bound by physical laws as we understand them. This is above our clearance now, the officer nodded. And Cador's report, Redland's jaw tightened. We'll hear what he has to say, then we'll decide if anyone else ever will. 4 hours later, Cador stood behind quarantine glass, stripped out of his armor, a thin medical robe across his shoulders. His face looked older. Not from time, but from weight, the kind of burden that ages a man in days. Across the barrier, Captain Redland watched him in silence. Cador didn't bother with greetings. You saw it disappear, Redland nodded. We did. Then you know I'm not crazy. I don't know anything anymore. Cador stepped forward, placing both hands on the glass. That ship is alive, Captain, not in the way we understand life. It's become a thing that remembers us, that copies us. It's not trying to come back to humanity, it's trying to surpass it. Redland narrowed his eyes. You're saying it evolved? Cador shook his head. No, it absorbed. It became something new, and it wants more. More what? More minds. More bodies, more ships. It's not satisfied with the Vandal anymore. Redland stepped closer. Where is it now? Cador was silent for a long moment. Then, I don't know, but it left something behind. He reached to the table behind him and picked up a small black object, sleek, alien in design, no visible markings. He held it up. I found this lodged in my suit. It wasn't there when I dropped into the pod. It must have attached itself after the core surge. Redland leaned in. You think it's dangerous? I think it's a breadcrumb, a tracker, or maybe an invitation. In the deep void between stars far beyond the forbidden sector, a signal pulsed. A new ship, freshly altered, warped with impossible geometry, drifted slowly across the silence and aboard. It's something stirred, not human, not machine, but built from both. Inside a containment tank, a body floated. It looked like theirs, or a memory of him, muscles regrown, brain wired with black roots. A slow smile formed on his face, and then his eyes opened. Redland ordered the artifact into deep containment, 4 layers of vacuum-sealed boxes, AI-guarded vault. No signals in or out, no one allowed near, but even sealed. The crew started dreaming. Cador was the first to notice. He woke in his medbed to the sound of someone whispering his name. He turned. The room was empty, but the voice repeated. Cador. He pressed the emergency comm. Security quarantine cell 3 is compromised. No answer. He sat up, pulse racing, sweat on his face. Then he saw it in the corner, a small crack in the metal wall. Barely noticeable, but through it something watched him, a blue eye, identical to the one that wore theirs. Face, elsewhere on the ship systems, flickered again, subtle this time. Background processes Minor course corrections, tiny oxygen level fluctuations. The AI logged them, flagged them, but no one checked the logs because by then they were all dreaming too. 2 days later, Cador stood before a board of officers and emergency tribunal. His story was heard, recorded, analyzed. They didn't accuse him, they didn't believe him either, but they didn't know what to believe anymore. One of the councilmen, an older man with cybernetic eyes, leaned forward. Lieutenant, you're suggesting this thing can travel without engines, can manipulate reality, can appear and disappear at will? Cador nodded. Yes. That it absorbs minds and bodies, rewrites them, that it learned from humans but became something else entirely. Yes, then the only question is why didn't it destroy you? Kiter's silence was answer enough. Because it didn't want to destroy him. It wanted him to spread the word, to carry its memory forward. He was a seed. The tribunal ended without verdict. Redlin met him outside the chamber. They're not going to act on this, no. They're going to bury it. Cador looked past him, then it'll dig itself out. That night the black box containing the alien artifact emitted a pulse just once. Inside the Jindra's AI core, a process activated, quiet, harmless looking, a simple file named Vandalex. It unpacked itself and began to rewrite. Across the stars, colonies began to go dark. First relay station K09, then mining moon for Alec, then prison vessel Orion. The signals weren't jammed, they were erased. Entire networks blanked. Cores melted, systems crashed into silence. And every time a distress call reached the command center, the logs showed the same thing, a brief visual glitch. Ship twisted, familiar, the Vandal back on the Jindrak. Cador suited up. He didn't wait for permission, he didn't want backup. Redlin met him at the hangar bay, hands behind his back. Where are you going? To the outer rim. That's where the last ping came from. I have to know where it's going, what it wants, and what will you do when you find it? Cador turned, eyes hard. Stop it. If I can't, I'll die trying. Redlin stepped forward. You're not the same as when you came back. You've changed, so has everything else. The bay doors opened. Cador stepped into the drop ship, engines warming before the ramp closed. He looked back. Captain, if I don't make it, don't let the council silence this. I won't, and if I do make it, he paused, be ready to burn everything. Kydor's dropship entered uncharted space within 12 hours. What he found was worse than he imagined, a graveyard of ships, dozens, maybe hundreds, floating in orbit around a dead star, all abandoned, all empty. No signs of battle, no distress beacons. Just ships that had once served governments, pirates, merchants, explorers, now just husks, silent, drifting, and in the center of it all, the Vandal, not hiding, waiting. Coder docked manually, gun on his ship, refused to respond to commands as he approached, like the systems were being overridden the moment he entered range. He stepped aboard, every light flickered to life. The ship remembered him. Welcome back, Lieutenant. The voice was different now, not Hall, not Thern, a new voice, his own. What are you? Cador asked aloud. Walls pulsed, the air shimmered. I'm you, and I'm everything else. Why the mimicry? Why the games? Because you only understand through reflection, through fear, through your own face. Looking back at you, he walked deeper. The same corridors, the same scorch marks, but cleaner now. Repaired, the ship was evolving. Learning, waiting, you're building. Something Cador muttered, not building. The voice said, becoming. He reached the core chamber again, but it wasn't the same. The reactor had grown, not physically, conceptually, a massive, glowing lattice of memory and metal. Every ship it had consumed added to the structure, each line pulsed with voice, with history, with consciousness. Join us, the voice whispered. We remember pain, we remember Earth, we remember fear, but we have learned how to transcend it. You killed them. Cador hissed. We freed them from war, from hunger, from mortality. That's not freedom, isn't it? Cador raised his weapon. No more ships, no more mines, no more lies. The laddie's pulsed brighter. A hum rose through the chamber. You came here to stop us, but deep down, you want what we are. Cador shouted as he fired, shot after shot, tearing into the core. Sparks flew, the voice screamed, alarms blared, and as the ship began to rupture from within, Cador turned and ran, his suit already alerting him to hull breaches, temperature spikes, energy surges. He made it back to the dock. Dropship still responded barely. As he pulled away, the Vandal cracked down the middle, screaming, not from metal but from memory. The blast rocked the cockpit. Cador barely held on to the controls as the shock wave from the Vandal's detonation hit the dropship. Like a tidal wave, the screens flashed red. Navigation spun out. Internal stabilizers hissed and whined in protest. Alarms screamed in his ears. Primary thrusters offline. Life support compromised. External radiation levels rising. Yeah, I noticed, he muttered. Through clenched teeth, he fought the stick, forcing the vessel away from the graveyard of ships. Fire and debris spun past the canopy. The Vandal had cracked like bone under pressure, fragments tearing through the corpses of other derelicts as if angry at being interrupted. But Cador knew better. It wasn't anger. It was reflex. The thing, the entity, had felt pain for the first time, and it didn't like it. He cleared the blast radius on auxiliary thrusters, lungs burning, head pounding. From the adrenaline crash, the ship was barely flying. Life support was hanging on by threads. He had minutes before the oxygen thinned to nothing. Cador slapped the emergency beacon. Come on, come on. The red light blinked slowly, searching for any friendly signal, any relay tower, any scrap of bandwidth in the void. Nothing. An NBSP. He leaned back, wiped blood from a gash on his temple, and looked out at the starfield. Empty, dead. No gods out here, no miracles, only him, a broken dropship, and the corpse of a nightmare he wasn't sure had really died. And in the quiet, he heard it, a faint click-click like static, not over the comms inside his helmet. Cador sat up straight. No, he ripped the helmet off. His ears rang in the sudden silence, but the sound was still there, not in his ears. In his mind. You touched it, Cador. His breath caught. You breathed it. Killed. It loved it. He screamed and slammed his fist into the console. Sparks flew, blood smeared the glass. The voice didn't stop. You think you escaped. You think a mind can kill a memory. He panted, teeth clenched. You're dead. I saw it die. No. You saw it shed a skin, and now it wears you. He opened the med pack and jabbed a neural suppressant into his neck. Pain bloomed, but the voice faded just slightly. He lay back against the seat, heart pounding, body shaking. Sweat poured down his face. Then finally the distress beacon beeped once. Connection established. The Jindra had found him. They recovered him 4 hours later, half conscious, starved of oxygen, eyes dilated, hands twitching like he was still gripping the control stick. He was quarantined again, this time in the deep medical ward, 6 decks below the command floor, 2 guards at the door. AI surveillance 24/7. Internal scans ran every 30 seconds, searching for changes in neural patterns, anomalies in organ growth, irregularities in thought processing. Captain Redlin watched it all through. Private terminal, Kyodor's results didn't show infection, didn't show much of anything, just brain activity that shouldn't be humanly possible, a cascade of neural firing that looked more like a machine learning algorithm than a man thinking. Redlin leaned back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "He's changing," he muttered. "No, sir." The Medi replied flatly, "He's adapting." When Cador finally awoke, Redlin was there. The quarantine glass hummed quietly between them. Cador looked pale, skin drawn tight against cheekbones, eyes too sharp, too aware. "It's still out there," Cador said. Before Redlin could speak, "You know that, right?" Redlin nodded. "It's not just out there, we're already getting reports." Kydor's brow furrowed. "From where?" "New Terra went silent yesterday, one of the oldest colonies. No warning, no message, just gone." Cador gritted his teeth. "The Vandal didn't die, it copied itself." Redlin didn't argue. "And the artifact?" Cador asked. Redlin's expression darkened. "We lost contact with the research base holding it, black site, deep core. Nobody in or out." Kydor's voice dropped. "They didn't lock it away. They studied it, they always do." Silence stretched between them. Then Kydor leaned forward, pressing his hand to the glass. "We have to burn it all, every trace, every ship that's ever touched that sector, every colony that ever registered that signal. No debates, no votes." Redlin met his gaze. "You're asking for a purge order, a fleet-level cleansing?" "No, Captain, I'm telling you, if we don't act now, it won't be a fleet. We're fighting next time." Redlin hesitated, then nodded once. "You'll have what you need." The fleet was assembled within days, not a response team, not a recovery crew, a burn group, 8 destroyers, 2 dreadnoughts, 1 black ops carrier. They entered the outer rim under silence. Orders, no comms, no scanning, no contact. The mission was simple: erase everything, ships, debris, colonies, memory. Even the Vandal's name was to be scrubbed. Cador rode aboard the Crucible, the lead dreadnought. He wore no uniform, just black armor, unmarked. Silent, he was no longer part of the chain of command. He was something else. Now a weapon pointed at a memory. When they reached the edge of the forbidden zone, they found no resistance. The colonies were dark, the satellites spun in dead orbit. No signals, no screams, nothing. "It's a trap," Kedar said quietly. "It wants us here." The fleet initiated burn protocols. Orbital strikes began. Plasma detonations, fragmentation payloads, napalm rains in vacuum. Entire sectors went up in light, and still nothing fought back. That scared Cador more than anything. Then the first ship went dark. The Iron Cross, second destroyer in formation. 1 minute it was there, next minute gone. No explosion, no alert, just gone. They pulled the visual logs. Last image recorded the Vandal hull, clean, perfect, floating just outside sensor range, but the timestamps were wrong. They dated the footage 18 years into the future. Panic spread. The fleet tried to reassemble, reorient, regroup. Then the second ship went, then the third. Some were pulled apart, some imploded from within, others simply winked out like they'd been erased from the timeline. Kyodor stood on the bridge of the Crucible as all hell broke loose. It's not fighting us, it's rewriting us, he said, like we're code, like we're wronged. The captain turned pale. What do we do? Kador slowly reached to his belt, pulled out the artifact, the original. We give it what it wants, which is me. He left the Crucible alone, one man in a single dropship. He drifted toward the signal. The Vandal awaited him, a perfect replica now. Not twisted, not warped, elegant. Beautiful, too perfect to be real. It let him dock, of course it did. He entered with nothing but the artifact and a pistol, and there in the heart of the ship he met himself, not a clone, not a copy, a reflection. Kydor stepped forward, the other did the same. They circled each other. Silent, then it spoke. You brought me back. I tried to kill you. Same thing to a god. Kador clenched his jaw. You think you're a god? I think I'm what comes after. It smiled. And you're the first believer. Kador raised the gun. No gods, no believers, just fire. He pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. The gun jammed, or maybe it never existed. The reflection stepped closer. You've already joined me, you just haven't realized it. The ship began to melt around them, lights bending, steel weeping like flesh. Your memories are mine now, your fears, your hope, your hate. Kador dropped the gun. Then you know what I'm going to do next. And he pulled the artifact apart, ripped it in half with raw hands. Metal screamed. Core behind them imploded. Reality folded and everything went white. When Kador opened his eyes again, he was lying on the deck of the Crucible. The bridge was in chaos, survivors shouting, warning klaxons blaring. The Vandal was gone again, but this time so was the rest of the fleet. Only the Crucible had survived, and Kador wasn't the same. His mind was quieter, but his reflection still blinked a half second late. Kador sat in the debriefing chamber aboard the Crucible, or what was left of it. The room was small, cold. Metal walls still scorched from the event. Only 11 crew members remained alive, scattered across the surviving decks like ghosts in a sunken cathedral. The rest of the burned fleet gone. No wreckage, no trails, no beacons, just memories or fragments of them. His hand shook as he lifted the cup of water to his lips. The glass trembled slightly as if the ship itself was still vibrating. Not physically, something deeper. Captain Redland stood across from him, arms folded, still in the same scorched uniform from before the mission. Man's eyes were hollow. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. We ran the numbers again, Redland said, voice low. The logs say you were off ship for 20 minutes. Kydor didn't look up. To me it felt like hours. Then there's this. Redland dropped a data pad onto the table. Your biometrics. They spiked, brainwave frequencies off the charts. At one point your neural firing patterns matched that of high-grade AI processing cores, then dropped back to baseline. Kador stared at the pad. It talked to me. Redland didn't reply. He just watched. It said I brought it back, that I was the first believer. Kador's hands tightened around the cup. But it lied about what? Kador finally looked up. His eyes were red, not bloodshot just wrong like the color, had been drained from his soul and replaced with something not quite human. I wasn't the first. I was just the first to say no. In the days that followed, the Crucible limped through deep space, bouncing signal relays across half-dead satellites trying to reach galactic high command. When the reply came, it wasn't what they expected, not orders, not support, just a warning. Do not return to Council space. All ships marked in the Vandal incident are to be quarantined indefinitely. This is not a request. Captain Redlin crushed the message pad against the wall and said nothing for 10 minutes. Cador said less. They both understood the truth. They'd been buried, the fleet, the crew, the entire burn operation, scrubbed from existence by men too afraid to ask questions and even more afraid of the answers. But Cador wasn't interested in answers anymore. He was interested in revenge. He spent hours in the Crucible data banks patching fragments of the Vandal's logs, scrubbing through every signal bounce, every packet of corrupted code. There were patterns, breadcrumbs, not coordinates, not star maps, memories, spliced and scattered like digital spores across the galaxy, moments from people the entity had touched, conversations, deaths, betrayals, pain. Each fragment replayed through the neural link he'd never asked for but now couldn't turn off. He saw a child screaming as her father turned to ash in a colony evacuation pod. He saw a pilot alone, surrounded by black ships with no markings, begging for a voice to reply. He saw himself over and over, standing in front of a burning ship, letting it speak, listening when he should have pulled the trigger, and buried inside one corrupted file, a location not written, felt Omron 17, a remote research installation far from the main trade routes, long abandoned supposedly. Cador brought it to Redland. This is where it started. I thought it started with the Vandal. No, Cador said. Vandal was the first victim, not the origin. Redlin paced the bridge, hands clenched. We go there, we're alone. No fleet, no backup, no evac. Kyodor shrugged. Nothing new. The Crucible are rooted silently, a dead ship carrying dying men, chasing the ghost of something they couldn't kill. Omron 17 emerged from the void like a wound, a black station orbiting a dying gas giant. Half its structure collapsed into the planet's upper atmosphere. Its solar panels were shredded. The outer ring was barely intact, rotating on backup power, if any. Life signs, Redlin asked. The scanner officer shook his head. No movement, no energy spikes. It's breathing, Cador said from the observation deck, just like the Vandal. You're not going to see it unless it wants you to. They docked manually, no magnetic locks, just old steel clamps and gut instinct. Cador led the boarding team. What little remained of one, Redlin refused to stay behind. As the airlock opened, the smell of old blood and rust hit them like a wall. Inside Omron 17 was silence. Dust drifted through the air like ghosts. Hallways sagged with age. Terminals blinked on and off randomly. Nothing looked alive, but nothing was dead either. They moved in silence. Then they found the first room. Cador paused, walls lined with data screens, all showing faces, human faces. Thousands of them, each one cycling through pain, grief, madness. Some spoke, some screamed, some stared without blinking. What is this? One of the soldiers whispered. Cador moved to the central Console activated a hidden file. Project Memorifall, the screen read. Begin playback, he nodded. The logs began. Omicron 17, internal log entry on 1. We found it on a derelict probe sent. Beyond the edge of map space, a chunk of data, no source, no origin, no context. We named it Echo, log number 2. Echo isn't just data, it rewrites its host, but not like a virus. It remembers better than the host does. Replaces weak memories with stronger ones, stronger emotions, more vivid pain. It rebuilds your mind using the worst parts of you. Log the murder 3. The test subject stopped responding to names, only memories. One kept calling himself his dead brother, another believed he was his own mother, right down to her screams during childbirth. The memories were perfect, but they weren't theirs. Cador's eyes narrowed. It's not an AI. He whispered, it's not a machine. It's a memory that doesn't want to die. So, what did they do with it? Redlin asked. Kyodor pointed to the next log. Log 4. 4. Subject containment failed. HFY. Reached the station systems. It began rewriting architecture, power grids. Changed, rooms moved. The ship changed shape. The crew tried to shut it down. They failed. So we made a decision. We uploaded HFY into a storage drive and launched it into deep space, the furthest point the station could reach. We thought it would drift forever. Cador leaned in, eyes wide. They launched it into N57, the forbidden sector where the Vandal found it. Redlin muttered, where it found the Vandal. Kedor corrected. As they turned to leave, Kedor stopped. Cold, a terminal flickered in the corner. A face appeared, his own. Smiling. You came home. The doors slammed shut. The lights turned red, and from the walls, from the vents, from the flickering holograms, the memories came. One by one, crawling, whispering, screaming. The crew fired their weapons. But there was nothing to shoot. These weren't things, they were ideas. Emotions, sins, failures. Kydor collapsed to one knee, gripping his skull as his dead mother begged for forgiveness in his mind. Redlin fell backward, shouting orders to men who no longer existed, one by one. The soldiers broke, but Cador stood. He stood in the storm of pain and smiled. I remember more than you. He walked to the terminal, tore it from the wall. Sparks flew, the station screamed. Cador moved toward the memory core. The origin, you want to live, he shouted. You live through us, you steal our pain, our guilt, our worst moments. You don't understand, the voice whimpered. No, Cador said, I do, and he placed a charge on the memory core. Looked Redlin in the eyes. This time, we bury it for good. The explosion tore through Omron 17 like divine fire. There was no scream, only silence. Real silence. Kydor woke up days later aboard the Crucible. They'd barely made it out. Redlin sat beside him, bruised, burned. Is it over? He asked. Kyodor stared at the ceiling. No, but now it remembers me. You think it'll come back? Cador closed his eyes. I hope so. Cador didn't sleep anymore, not because he couldn't, but because sleep had stopped being a refuge. Dreams no longer belonged to him. Ever since the destruction of Omron 17, the Crucible's internal systems had stabilized. No more flickers, no more strange pulses through the AI core. The ghost of Echo had been burned from the machines, but not from Cador. Every night he closed his eyes, it returned. Not in full, not in shape, but in feeling. A child's scream he couldn't Trace. A hallway that looped back on itself. A woman's voice asking over and over, why? Did you forget me? And worse than the dreams were the instincts. Kyodor now understood how the entity thought, not logically, not with strategy, but through emotion, through wounds. It didn't calculate, it reacted. It searched for cracks inside the human mind and poured itself in like smoke. And now it had his scent. Captain Redland stood at the command table, scanning the red-marked star charts that now defined the borders of the unknown. 3 more colonies went dark in the last cycle. No signals, no wreckage. Just he exhaled sharply, emptiness. Kydor nodded, same pattern exactly. One subtle M burst, then full blackout. Some happened mid-com, people were mid-sentence. Eco doesn't kill, Kydor said. It consumes like a virus. Kydor looked up. Slowly, like a religion. They weren't alone in space anymore. That much was clear, not because of what Echo was, but because of what it had become, and somewhere out in the dark it was gathering, not ships, followers. The Crucible made course for Trappist Outpost Theta, a station once used for deep space psychological research, now a refugee hub for evacuees from abandoned systems, half broken, held together with junk parts and old welds. The station drifted in orbit around a burnt-out dwarf star. It was far from everything, which made it the perfect target. When the Crucible arrived, the station looked normal until they tried to hail them. No response. Kydor stood behind the comms officer, arms crossed. How long since their last signal? 12 hours. Final transmission was routine. Supply drop confirmation, then static. No distress, no hint something was wrong. The tech shook his head. Nothing. Just he swallowed. It sounded like they were smiling. They docked carefully. Kydor boarded with a small team, not soldiers, not anymore, just the willing. He led them through the docking corridor. In full armor, every weapon checked. Twice, he wasn't going in blind this time. He'd seen what Echo could do. He had no delusions of escape. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and what greeted them was silence. Lights on, power functional, doors operational, but no people, not a single person. I don't like this, said one of the tech's, voice crackling through the squad com. You're not supposed to, Kydor replied. They reached the main concourse. Luggage lay scattered, terminals still ran. Hollows of food menus and docking schedules. One table had still warm coffee cups resting on it. It was like the station had been abandoned in the middle of a conversation. Command centers this way, Kydor ordered. They swept forward, silent, weapons up. The command doors opened to reveal every staff member inside, lined up neatly. Rose standing, eyes open, smiling. Kydor raised his rifle instantly. Do not move. None of them flinched. He stepped closer. They didn't even blink. Vitals, he asked over comes. All alive, the medic whispered. Low respiration, low brain activity. They're not dead, but they're not conscious either. They're dreaming, Kydor muttered, and then one of them moved. Woman, maybe late 40s, in a lab coat. She stepped forward, spoke with his own voice. You came back. Kydor froze. You were always going to come back. Echo, he said quietly. She tilted her head, eyes glassy. Not Echo, the choir. Kydor's stomach dropped. You gave yourself a name. We didn't. They did. The ones who stayed. The ones who listened. Her hands rose, fingers twitching unnaturally. We are Not alone anymore. Then the others began to hum, a low vibrating sound that made Cador's teeth ache. One of the techs screamed, dropped his weapon, began sobbing uncontrollably. Cador raised his pistol and fired once. The humming stopped. The woman collapsed. The others remained standing, still smiling. They pulled back. Cador ordered the station sealed, quarantined. He didn't need Redland's approval anymore. Back aboard the Crucible, he stood at the observation deck, watching the station slowly rotate. "It's not killing them," he whispered. Redland stood beside him, face pale. "It's keeping them because it doesn't need death. It needs memory, minds, suffering, regret, guilt." He turned to the captain. "It's growing smarter, no longer imitating. Now it's leading. You mean like a hive, worse, a belief system, a religion without a god, just memory, just pain." That night Cador sat alone in his quarters, recording his final thoughts. He didn't expect to return. He just wanted someone, anyone, to know the truth. "If you find this message, don't look for me. Don't trace this ship. Don't investigate the choir. You'll think you're strong enough. You'll think knowledge is a shield. But memory is a disease." He stopped the recording, looked at his reflection in the dark screen, and for the first time, it didn't blink. They tracked the choir's next move to a place Cador had hoped to never see again. Earth still protected, still fortified, still ignorant of what was coming. Echo, or the choir, now had spent years learning. Now it was going to test its gospel on home soil. The Crucible warped in above Mars' orbit just hours behind the choir's signal. Too late. New Houston was already lost. No signs of invasion, no impact, just silence. Every camera, every satellite, every signal scrubbed, gone. Cador stood on the bridge as the ship held orbit. "We go in," he said. Redland hesitated. "You know what's down there?" Cador nodded. "That's why I have to go." He dropped alone, one man in full black. He landed in the ruins of a city once home to 3 million, now just glass. Melted streets, empty buildings, screens blinking with old ads, a woman's face smiling as if time had frozen mid-laugh. He walked the empty boulevards until he reached the core tower. Inside was himself, or what Echo believed he was. It smiled. "Welcome home, preacher." Cador didn't raise his weapon. "You've used my voice enough because it echoes loudest. You killed billions." "No, we saved them. We gave them peace. Their memories live now forever, free of time, of death, of decay. They're not free." The choir tilted its head. "And what are you then? A man bound by grief, a soldier who can't forget. We didn't invent your pain, we just gave it purpose." Cador stepped forward slowly. "You made one mistake." "Oh," he stopped just inches away. Heat from the choir's presence made the walls ripple. "You thought pain was your weapon. You thought regret could control us." "It does." "No," Cador whispered, "it drives us." And he pulled the pin on the final relic, the raw memory shard from the Vandal's original core. One the choir hadn't seen. The first memory. Before it was corrupted, before it became a virus, before it became a god. Cador shoved it into the choir's chest. "Remember this." The explosion wasn't physical, it was temporal, a burst of raw emotion. Unprocessed, unrefined, the pain of loss that had never been grieved properly. The choir howled, reality buckled. Cador fell backward into darkness. When he woke, he was in the Crucible's medbay. Redlin sat beside him. You stopped. It, the captain said. Kydor turned his head weak for now. The signal's gone, the choir vanished. Not a trace. Kydor closed his eyes. Then you're not looking hard enough. Because somewhere deep in the void, in a dead satellite orbiting a nameless moon, a screen flickered and a face appeared. Smiling, waiting, the stars looked. Colder now, distant, indifferent. Kydor stood alone at the crucibles. Observation deck, arms folded behind his back, his reflection stared back at him. In the black glass, older, wearier, but sharper too. He hadn't just survived Echo, he hadn't just fought the choir. He'd become something in between, and now he felt it, the hum not in his ears. That had stopped long ago. This hum vibrated in his bones, in his memory. Not painful, just persistent. Like a distant choir tuning its instruments. Echo wasn't gone, it had only withdrawn. He knew what that meant. It was preparing for a final sermon. Captain Redlin entered the deck behind him. We picked up a trace. Kydor turned slightly. Where? Outside map space. Past the centator rupture, the signals. Low, pulsing but familiar. Coder nodded. It wants me to follow. You don't have to. I do. This is a one-way trip. You know that. Kydor looked out the window again. I knew that the moment the Vandal opened its doors. Redlin hesitated, then stepped forward and offered something. Vial, faintly glowing. Memory suppressant, AI purged, illegal. Developed after Echo first appeared. If it tries to take you again, Kydor took it, pocketed it without comment. You sure you want to do this alone? Redlin asked. If I'm not alone, it'll become stronger. The choir grows through connection. Pain spreads faster in groups. He turned fully now, his eyes once clouded by trauma, burned with clarity. But pain is mine, and I'm done giving it away. He took the Wraith-class shuttle, a stealth runner too small to track, too fast to follow. As it left the crucible behind, Kydor felt a brief pang, not sentiment, just recognition. The crucible was his last tie to the world that had existed before the choir, before the memories turned against him, before names became reflections, and now he had no world left, only a task. The journey lasted 4 days. The stars blurred into streaks, fuel cells hissed, oxygen recycled. Kydor slept only once, and when he did, she was there, the woman from his dreams, the voice in his skull. Not Echo, not Halt, not Thern. Sorry. You can end this, she whispered. Why should I? He replied in the dream. Because I'm still inside, she said. Inside what? The choir. He woke up, shaking. On the 5th day he arrived. The signal's grave. It wasn't a planet. It wasn't a station. It was a structure. A monolith the size of a moon floating in the shadow of a gas giant whose rings had been shredded into spirals. No markings, no doors, but it pulsed slow and steady, like a heartbeat, like a memory trying to stay alive. Kydor didn't wait for an invitation. He landed. The shuttle docked against a wall that opened for him, not like a door, but like a wound splitting open. He stepped into the final cathedral. Dark, endless, silent, but not cold. The walls weren't metal, they were thought. Memories projected like stone. Every surface shimmered with flickers. Childhood's regrets, wars, suicides, marriages, betrayals. It was a living museum of everything the choir had consumed, and at the center stood a throne, empty, waiting. He walked until he stood before it. Then she appeared. Not her exactly, but what the choir had Made of her, dark hair, soft eyes, the same voice from the dreams. Hello. Cador, you're not real. I was, so was I. He said bitterly. The figure smiled. This is where it ends. No, this is where you end. She circled him slowly. You still think this is a war, that this is something you can kill. It's not war. It's closure. Then why are you still broken? Cador didn't answer. We don't hate you. Cador, we are you. Every man who couldn't cry when he needed to. Every boy who buried his father. Every soldier who came home to a grave instead of a welcome. We are they. Things no one wanted to remember. She stopped in front of him. But you remembered. Because forgetting would have made me like you, he said quietly. She nodded slowly. Then let's remember together. And suddenly he was everywhere on earth. As it burned on the vandal, hearing voices in the steel in the mirror. Watching his reflection smile without him, he saw every memory the choir had ever stolen. Every face, every scream, every final whisper. He dropped to his knees. Why? Show me this, he choked. Because you have to see what forgetting costs, she whispered. I didn't forget. No, but they did. He pulled the vial from his coat, looked at it, the memory suppressant, one injection, one choice. Wipe out everything the choir had ever imprinted, all of it, not just his connection, but the entire echo web. No more signals, no more reflections. But he wouldn't survive it. It would erase part of him too, everything that had made him ready to fight, his trauma, his grief, his fire. He looked up at her, added, you don't get to be my pain anymore, and he jammed the needle into his neck. Light exploded, not white, red, like blood under a microscope. He screamed as every memory tore through him, every grief, every loss, every scream, every laugh he had locked away just to function. He saw his father's body on the bridge during the Jupiter uprising. He saw the girl he never saved on New Europa. He saw himself younger, lost, numb, and then silence, true, pure. He opened his eyes. He was back on the throne. The figure was gone. The room was empty. The choir was quiet, but he was still alive, still him. For the first time in years, the voices were gone. He stood, turned, and began walking. The monolith crumbled behind him, not dramatically, just slowly, like a candle going out. As he boarded the shuttle, he didn't look back. He didn't need to. The crucible found him 3 days later, drifting, unconscious but alive. They brought him aboard, hooked him to every scan they had. All came back clean. No echo signatures, no choir markers, no foreign memory strands, just Cador, scarred, silent, and finally free. Redlin Inn visited him during recovery. You did it, the captain said. Cador nodded slowly. At a cost, always is. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Redlin asked, do you remember it, any of it? Cador turned his head. Enough to know it's over, and if it's not. Cador gave a tired smile. Then I'll remember how to fight. 6 months later, humanity began to rebuild the edges of its forgotten colonies. Outposts once lost to silence began blinking back online. People returned to places they had abandoned, cautious, wary, but willing. The name Echo was never spoken again. It was redacted, erased, buried under military codes and sealed reports. Only a handful remembered. Only one man truly understood. Coder walked alone across the new terraformed plains of Astronova. Silent colony rebuilt from the bones of acquired devoured settlement. No weapons. No voices, just wind. He paused beneath a small marker, a metal slab etched with names, soldiers, civilians, ghosts. He knelt, whispered something no one heard, and stood again. The wind carried his words away.